Hi everybody, TJ Mack and Vintage Cards and Nostalgia here. And today I'll be doing the 10th episode of my AFL case build. I have the previous 9 episodes in my playlist if you care to go back and watch those. I enjoy doing this series because it speaks to players you don't hear about every day. It also enables me to use my cards as a tool for not only teaching myself, but others about the history of the American Football League, which existed from 1960 to 1969 before merging with the NFL at the start of the 1970 season. Now, it's been a few months since I've made a video on this series because I continue to spend time researching the league as well as acquiring cards from my collection. I was very happy to add this November 1960 Dell Pro Football magazine that has several articles I was looking forward to reading. There was a 1960 NFL preview that captured my interest, as I always like to see what the experts of the day thought about the upcoming season. Then there was also an interesting article on how 10 all-time greats, and you can see them there in the bottom left corner, rate Johnny Unitas. Now I'll go through some of those articles in another video. However, what I want to focus on today is this wonderful article that speaks to the first season of the AFL. Now I'm guessing this is one of the first magazines to speak to the AFL, being the league was just entering its inaugural season. Now the AFL started with 8 teams: the Buffalo Bills, Boston Patriots, Dallas Texans, Denver Broncos, Houston Oilers, Los Angeles Chargers, New York Titans, and Oakland Raiders. Now the Raiders were a late addition after Minnesota, who originally committed to the AFL, pulled out after the NFL offered them a franchise. This team became known later on, of course, as the Minnesota Vikings, and they entered the league in 1961. The AFL began preparing for the 1960 season in 1959, but by the time the 1960 football draft started in November of 1959, they didn't have scouts in place on many of the teams to look at the college talent. So management had to rely on publications like Street and Smith's to rank the players. Now, one of the ideas the league came up with to draw area support for the franchises was to give each of them a territorial pick, which was used on a player that went to a college in a designated area. For example, that is why LSU's Billy Cannon was taken by the Houston Oilers. Another famous player that was set to go to the Dallas Texans was Don Meredith, who played college ball at Southern Methodist University, but Meredith ended up going to the NFL rival franchise, the Dallas Cowboys, who were also an expansion team that started the same year. Now here's Meredith on his 1962 Topps second year card, and he's on the Cowboys, as you can see. Now back then, if your pick went to the other league, you just forfeited it. Could you imagine that happening today? So from 1960 through 1966, the AFL and NFL would battle over players. For example, Billy Cannon, who I just talked about, and this is his 1960 Flair rookie card, he was drafted number 1 overall by the LA Rams in 1960, but as I said, he ended up signing with the Oilers, so the Rams forfeit that pick. Then you had USC standout tackle here on the end, and future Hall of Famer Ron Mix, and this is his 1960 Flair rookie card, and he's in his USC uniform. Mix was drafted by the Colts, but he was also drafted by the AFL's Chargers, where he eventually signed. Now, I've studied this league pretty closely, and for simplicity purposes, I have broken the league into 2 eras, and I centered around Joe Namath, who was the league's most impactful player. Here is Broadway Joe showing on his 1967 Topps card. You have the pre-Joe Namath era, which was from 1960 to 1964, and the Joe Namath era from 1965 to 1969. Now I'll talk about that time frame another day. In the pre-Namath era, though, the AFL was just starting out and assembling a talent base of players to compete with the NFL. When the league first started, you had guys that had success in the NFL, but weren't really wanted anymore, like George Blanda. Now here is Blanda on his 1954 Bowman first card with the Bears, and I say first card because he really started playing in the late 40s. And then you see him on his 1964 Topps card depicting him in his Houston Oilers uniform. And Blanda was the league MVP in 1961, and he was really one of the early stars of the league at that time. And he won 2 AFL championships, the first 2 actually, with the Oilers in 1960 and 1961. Blanda was also a gifted kicker and is on the All-AFL team as the starting kicker. Here are 2 other quarterbacks that were on NFL rosters but could never break through into starting positions. You have Jack Kemp that was shown on here in his 1963 Fleer card. Originally started with the Chargers, but this would be his first card with the Buffalo Bills, who acquired him later on. But Kemp originally had a short stint with the Steelers, but was cut, then was out of football for a couple years, and then came into the AFL. And then you have Len Dawson shown here on his 1964 Topps card, which is his second card. Now, he bounced around with Pittsburgh and then Cleveland from 1957 until 1961. Now, here he is in this magazine, advertised as the future starter for the Browns. He was originally drafted in the first round by the Steelers in 1957, but his career never took off, and the Steelers traded him to the Cleveland Browns. Now, Browns head coach Paul Brown originally wanted to draft Dawson, but again, he got him through trade, and he was set to be the starter. As you can see here in this article, it says much depends on this man Dawson. But what happened was he got in a car accident before training camp and injured his arm, and it was Milt Plum who took over the job and ended up having a Pro Bowl season that year for the Browns. Now, Dawson eventually ended up on the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs, which were formerly the Dallas Texans, in 1962, and he became the starter under his former college head coach, Hank Stram. Now, Dawson was 27 years old at the time. He led the Chiefs to 3 AFL championships and a huge upset over the Vikings in Super Bowl IV. Dawson, of course, would later be elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Then you had guys who couldn't make it in the NFL, like Don Maynard, Paul Lowe, and Art Powell. All 3 are actually wearing NFL jerseys in these pictures from their 1961 Topps cards. And these are all the teams that cut them. Maynard has a Giants uniform on, Lowe a 49ers, and Powell an Eagles jersey. Maynard would go on to make the Hall of Fame. Powell was one of the league's most prolific receivers, and he was a Hall of Fame finalist this year, and I really thought he was going to make it, but he didn't end up getting in, which really upset me because he certainly is a Hall of Famer in my book. And then you also have here Paul Lowe, who was the 1965 league MVP. He's also a first-team All-AFL running back for the decade. This was just a fantastic time in football history where you're really seeing some players get an opportunity to shine like these 3, and they did. Now, besides former NFL regulars and players that couldn't really cut it in the league, the third type of player that you'd have come in are these young, talented players that came right out of college. And I talked about Billy Cannon already and Ron Mix, but I recently added this Abner Haynes card, and I picked it up, I think, sometime in December or January. And this is his 1960 Fleer rookie card, showing him in this fantastic pose in his North Texas State uniform. Now, Haynes was originally drafted by the Steelers in the 5th round, as well as in the AFL, I believe it might have been the 2nd round in the AFL. And there's a funny story that was told in a Showtime series on the AFL where Steelers coach Buddy Parker and their future Hall of Fame quarterback Bobby Lane go to Haynes' home drunk and tell the Haynes family they plan on taking him in the draft tomorrow. And they were also making fun of the AFL. Well, Abner's dad, who was a very imposing figure and a Baptist minister who had a very deep voice, told Abner after this incident, "You won't be playing with the Steelers." And Abner said, "Yes, sir," and he signed with the Dallas Texans. It turned out Texans owner Lamar Hunt met with the Haynes family, and Abner's dad really took a liking to the humble Lamar, and he was very much treated with respect that day. So Abner's dad wanted his son to play for the Texans. Now, what a windfall this turned out to be for the AFL. Haynes was just such a big star in this league. He took home the 1960 Rookie of the Year, the MVP, and he also led the league in rushing yards with 875 and touchdowns. He actually led the league in touchdowns each year from 1960 to 1962. Now, he played in the league until 1967, where he retired as a New York Jet. Haynes was selected to the all-time AFL second team at running back. He was just a great player, and I'm really thrilled to add this rookie card to my collection. This card cost me about $30 to give you an idea of what a card like this goes for from that era. I hope everyone enjoyed this very short history lesson on the AFL. I plan on continuing to do episodes on this series, as I believe its history is critical in understanding the modern NFL. The original AFL teams formed the AFC in 1970, along with the NFL's Baltimore Colts and Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, as football fans, we owe a debt of gratitude to the original 8 AFL owners, who were known at the time as the Foolish Club. The NFL did not take this league seriously when it started, but by the mid-60s, the NFL changed its tune and was seeking a merger because the competition between the two leagues was becoming much too costly. But that is a story for another day. Until next time, God bless and have a great week.